Hello and welcome back to Theater Appreciation. I'm your teacher, Professor Garcia, and today what we are going to cover is realism. Now, realism shapes almost everything that you see today, but how did it start? And how did we go from melodrama into realism? Well, we're going to cover that today. We're going to cover a little bit about the history of realism and how we move from melodrama to realism, and then you're going to learn about some game changers, some artists who completely transform the way we see entertainment today. So let's get started. Realism begins in the late 1800s. And there's a lot of different things that are all going on at the world at this time, and all of these things combine to set the stage for realism. So Comte comes out with sociology, and he starts studying the way groups interact. And Charles Darwin comes up with the theory of evolution, and he starts looking at human nature, animal nature, and how everything is connected. And then Sigmund Freud comes out with psychology and the study of the human brain. Now, all of these things combine with advances in technology, and there starts to be a societal shift towards science. And they start to look at science solving their problems instead of like governments or religion in general. And that really starts to set the stage for realism. So what are the characteristics of realism? Realism is really built on this principle of a fourth wall. Now, in a play, the set has 3 walls typically, and these walls represent the place that the play is taking place. And the fourth wall is the wall that would essentially separate the audience from the characters on stage. And what you're going to do is remove this imaginary wall so that the audience is acting as that wall, and what you're doing is looking into the lives of the characters that are before you. And they are going to act as though you are not there, and they're going to have realistic conversations, so the dialogue is going to sound the same as it would in your house, and the people are going to act the same as they would in your house. So nothing's going to be poetic. Nobody's going to have these long speeches that go, that discuss a problem really eloquently. No, they're going to say it the way you would say it. And the conflict is going to come out of the environment, the situations, and it's going to be realistic. And so one other characteristic that you're going to see is that it's very psychologically driven. So playwrights and stories are going to focus on how a character is feeling, how they would deal with this situation, and making sure that it's true to life. Verisimilitude, or the appearance of truth, is really, really big. They want it to look or seem as realistic as possible. So now a happy ending isn't necessarily guaranteed. A realistic ending would be. But realism also, so realism isn't realistic it's not perfectly normal or real, because real life is kind of boring. If we follow somebody for 24 hours, it's really boring. So think of realism as if you have a timeline, and this is your entire day in between my 2 hands, right? What we're going to do is we're going to take the most important parts of this day, and we're going to put those in front of you. So you're going to see the heightened moments of this realistic day, but nobody is going to act out of character. They are going to be a realistic person. Like with everything, there's a reaction against whatever the popular movement is. Now, naturalism comes about because people felt that realism wasn't real enough. They needed to amp it up.
Your realism needs to be more extreme.
So Emile Zola is one of the pioneers in this, but he decides, you know what? Things are going to be as realistic as it could possibly be.
Extreme.
And he creates naturalism. Now, naturalism short-lived, because you will soon find out, like I said before, realism or real life is kind of boring. So if you set 3 hours in front of somebody, it better be a really intense, compelling 3 hours. Or if it's just 3 hours of people living normal life, it's boring and no one's gonna care. But this attention to detail, right? Naturalism brings in, they want all of the costumes to be historically accurate. They want the time, place, and action, the unity, right? So they want the unities of time, place, and action to make sure that they stay consistent. So it's going to happen in one place. It's going to happen in sequential order. It's not going to go out. We're not going to jump time at any moment. And we're going to make sure that it all happens within whatever time frame you said it was going to happen in. And so that becomes the move, and it's influential because you'll see it pop up in film and other things like that. But it's kind of a short-lived movement. But that's what naturalism is, and that's the difference between naturalism and realism. The person who's credited as the father of realism is Henrik Ibsen. Henrik Ibsen was born in Norway, and his father died at a really, really young age, and then his mother remarried. And he was part of the elite in that country. And so his parents were really well connected, and they were really well respected, and he had a bright future ahead of him. And then at the age of 7, his father goes bankrupt and loses all of their money. And the public shame that comes along with this is just devastating. And this dude never, ever forgave his father. And so for the rest of his life, he's writing these plays that are working out his anger with his father. And every character in an Ibsen play has daddy issues. At about the age of 15, he drops out of school, he becomes an apprentice at a pharmacy, and then later at about 18, he decides he wants to go back to school, but he can't pass the entrance exams, so he just says, forget it, I'm gonna write plays. And that's what he starts doing. He takes over his own company, and he's writing these plays that aren't good compared to what he will later write, but what artist starts off at their peak? But he's still learning the game. And then when that company goes bankrupt, again, another devastating blow for him. So angry Ibsen starts going, fine, I'm gonna leave Norway. And when that happens, nothing becomes sacred to him anymore. And this guy is just angry now. And angry Ibsen is the best Ibsen. He starts looking to break down institutions. He's done. He wants his theater to challenge the world, and he really started to push the envelope. So then he writes this play, A Doll's House. When he writes A Doll's House, you see the transition from melodrama to realism. I mean, it's really the moment where you see melodrama shift to realism, and it happens in a play. And the beginning of the play is almost exclusively melodrama. It has all of the melodramatic stereotypes in it. There's a misplaced prop, there's a heroine, there's a really clear-cut villain and a hero and a sidekick. And all of these things are going on, and about 3/4 of the way through the play, all of it's resolved. And finally you think, yay, the hero has won. But that's where the real shift happens. And as soon as this letter, this misplaced prop comes back and now everything's solved, Nora goes, sit down, Torvald, we need to talk. And she just lets him have it. And this married couple has the first realistic conversation on stage. And audiences had no idea how to handle it. I mean, this is super uncomfortable for them. And when Nora gets up and she leaves and she slams the door, it was the door slam heard round the world. The audiences didn't think the play was over. They were like, this is weird. Why are they walking out and bowing in the middle of this show? And people had to walk out and be like, the show's over, go home. And then people were pissed. Everybody in the audience, like some people were going, I think she did the right thing. You're a monster. So they were having fights in the lobby. This is exactly what Ibsen wanted, right? He wanted to provoke people. He wanted to challenge the way you thought. And it did. In fact, it challenged people so much. Places just refused to put on the play after that. In certain countries, the play was forbidden. But again, controversy just makes people want to learn more about the plays. And in other countries too, like if the play was going to be done, he had to change the ending. So he has there's this alternative ending that is not the ending that he intended. And as a playwright, he continues to challenge his audiences, and he really is marked as the father of realism. Now, the true beginning of realism, though, happens in Russia. In Russia, you have a playwright that starts to come about, and his name is Anton Chekhov. Anton Chekhov was doctor. And as doctor, he traveled to different people's houses. This guy could study human nature like nobody's business. This guy was incredible. And he noticed something that, well, maybe other writers had noticed this before, but he was one of the first people to start writing it down. And he noticed that people lie. And when people lie, they are being truly human. So he begins to write this into his plays. Before this, in all theater, when a character came out and they said something, they were speaking their truth. Even if a character was lying, like Iago in Othello, he was telling the truth in every moment of the play, and it was that combo that you went, oh, he's lying. But in Chekhov, everybody's lying almost all the time. If they're ever honest, it's rare. And that causes a need for a new style of acting to emerge. So, Stanislavski and Danchenko at the Moscow Arts Theater create a new form of acting. And this form of acting transforms the world. It's using principles from Darwin and Freud and Comte, and it's combining that with dance and movement training, and they're creating something completely unique in order to take on these new realistic plays. In Chekhov's first play, The Seagull, is performed by the Moscow Arts Theater. It is so successful it goes all over not only Russia, but into other countries as well. This is really where you see realism take off. And when this happens, people do not know how to handle it. It is one of the most fascinating things that they've ever seen on stage, because people are speaking the way we speak. They're lying the way we lie. It feels like real life, but I'm being told a story that's interesting, and they love it. And so it starts to tour all over not only Russia, but other countries. And other countries ask members of this group to stay behind and teach them this new style of acting. And realism and realistic acting starts to spread in other countries as well. And that becomes the basis of all acting technique from that point forward. You're welcome. So if you love realism, you better thank Russia. You better thank the Moscow Arts Theater, Konstantin Stanislavski, and you better thank Anton Chekhov. Finally, in Europe, we have George Bernard Shaw. Ah, yes. One of the greatest minds of our time. George Bernard Shaw wrote many, many plays and is counted as second only to Shakespeare in his greatness. Now, George Bernard Shaw was born in Ireland. He was born in Ireland, but he became English. He moves to London, and then London just claims him as theirs. So he's an English playwright, even though he's Irish. But George Bernard Shaw was one of those people who was just a born genius. He loved to think, he loved to discuss ideas. And I have a feeling he was that friend, I don't know if you guys have this friend, that loves to hear themselves talk, and they will just expound on these ideas and just keep going. I'm pretty sure that's how this dude was. Now, if you look at his plays, for every play that he has a preface where he discusses the ideas of his play, and they are longer than the play itself. I know, like I said, this dude loved to talk and work out his ideas. And so when you watch a George Bernard Shaw play, you're going to watch these ideas of the time play out within the framework of the conflict. And then he will give arguments from every side in the play. So not only are you watching a really compelling, wonderful, realistic drama, but you're also watching, I don't know, a philosophy course as well, because you're kind of gaining information as you're watching it. See, you as the audience are going to be smarter having seen a George Bernard Shaw play than you were before you saw it. You are welcome. So what I want you to do is I want you to watch, read, or listen to the play A Doll's House. I don't care how you get exposed to it, I just want you to know the story. I want you to take the quiz, and then I want to meet on the discussion board so we can talk about the play. What did you think? Do you think Nora did the right thing? Do you think she did the wrong thing? And how do you feel that the play relates to today? So, I'll see you then. Thank you very much for going on this journey with me, and I'll see you soon.